Erika, hello. I'm so thrilled to have you here with me today.
Thank you, Alex. I'm so happy to be with you down under. I love it.
I
I'm
know it's so
excited about
great.
it.
The magic of
Very excited.
technology.
How amazing is it? Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
it really is. And what I love about it, especially, is I get to connect with people around the world who are doing incredible things like you are for your patients and in your work with your books and bring it to an audience that's kind of sprinkled everywhere. So, my first question is why hormones? I mean, as a doctor, you can go into all sorts of things, of course. And the way we've segmented medicine, you could literally just pick your favorite body part and like pretend that that's all that matters.
Every
Um,
cell of every body part.
which we're going to talk about what is wrong with that. But
Mhm.
hormones specifically interested you.
Um, you know what? Because actually hormones keep it all together.
Mm,
It doesn't break it into body parts. It doesn't break it into you can look at how they affect different body parts, but the thing is that hormones affect everything. So without realizing, because it wasn't like a really well thought through thing, I wound up started taking care of everything. And
mhm.
hormones are at the core of everything. So it was really wonderful. It kept me from getting to that tiny little living on a leaf when there's a whole tree and a whole forest behind me. So,
Yeah. And like the way you even just phrase that makes
yeah,
me, I had a picture in my mind of those communication superhighways with all the
yes.
wires.
Hmm.
And yeah, they are the master connectors of our entire system.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mm,
Because when your hormones are in balance, you could do anything, everything. I
hmm.
mean, when you're young and you're in balance and you're fertile and you're sexy and you don't have wrinkles and you feel great, then everything's working. And the moment things start short circuiting, like you just said, in
Mm.
this information superhighway, then it's a hormone that hormones are not doing what they should be doing and things start falling apart.
Yeah. And obviously, we see a lot of papers on hormones and all sorts of scientific papers around health. And I was curious to kind of start talking about how, as a clinician of over 40 years, how do you decide what's true and what to act on and what to bring into your practice and what you think is just sending people down the wrong path? Because as we now know with science, there's way too much money in medicine, and it has clouded the noble pursuit of finding out that which we hope to be true and how it evolves over time, right? So, as a clinician, it's like such a moving parts thing because some of it's true, some of it's funded and skewed. And how do you decide what to bring into your practice?
You care.
Mm,
If you care about your patients. So I've been very fortunate that um, I'm kind of in the cutting edge part of it because I'm on faculty at the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. So I get first dibs on every scientific everything that happens, right? But the interesting thing is that I um, realized that knowing all the latest and the best doesn't make it right for you, for the
mm-hmm.
patient. So I think that at the core of the whole thing is caring about your patients. And, as I was totally unable to give up on seeing patients ever, since I love my patients so much, um, I realized that if you care, you're going to make better decisions. And it's very interesting because it's very contrary to what conventional medical training would be, because they want you to be distant and they don't want you to take care of your family, friends, people you care about. And I actually realized that that's completely fallacious because it's a
Mm,
fallacy. Because if you care, you'll do a much better job. So
yeah.
that was one of my first revelations many years ago. But I think that um, now, with so much information coming our way, I think it becomes really important to know your patient, to know who you're talking to be in their lives, to understand what their priorities are, what they care about, what's stressing them, what their lifestyles are about, because then you can actually provide them with information and support that they can use that will benefit them rather than just being a robot, you know,
Mm.
giving them whatever the latest drug that the FDA here has approved.
Mm. And I really like there was like a subtext for me in what you've just said, which is to truly make sense of what is positive emerging science versus, yeah, I might park that until I see a bit more on that. Being a clinician is where you can really have the rubber meet the road because you're dealing with the humans, not just a petri dish or an animal study or a funded thing that's trying to make money to create a certain supplement or a pharmaceutical.
Correct. And you
Mm,
know, it's so interesting that you're saying that because at least, you know, when you're watching on Instagram, for instance, right? And you have a lot of experts, and some of them have experience and they're good, some of them are not, but some of them, you know, just listen, people will follow anything in the hopes for a cure-all, for you know,
mm,
the magic pill. But the thing is that if you realize that the individual is different. Every one of us is different. So when you see patients, like you said, that's when the rubber hits the tire. That's right.
mm.
Because
Yeah.
that's when you can actually do good or not. So that's when you actually are responsible for the outcome. Because
Mm-hmm.
having said that, you're not alone in your responsibility for the outcome. The patient and you should be a team. You
Mm,
should be the doctor I look at as being the quarterback, and the patient is really who I'm quarterbacking. So you want me to give you the information, and if I know you, I'll give you information that makes sense, and then we have to talk. We have to
mm,
talk. We have to plan how we're going to respond to, you know, whatever study comes out. And, you know, just because there are studies on, you know, silkworms that say that if you give them, you know, I don't know, rapamycin, they're going to live for longer, or
mm.
mice, by all means. But I don't know how I would actually have the audacity really to say to my patient, here, there's a study that just came up saying that, let me try it on you. It would be
Mm.
not quite what I would want my doctor
Yeah. And
to
I'd
look.
imagine you would then have a certain like window of risk like based on what is in the study and what could be the potential downsides. Because
Yeah,
sometimes you think, well, it's a quercetin study, it's not going to hurt. Let's give it a
right,
go for your
right,
inflammation or for hives or
exactly.
whatever. But
Well, those are
rapamycin.
easier. You know what?
Mm,
Those are easier. I chose rapamycin, which is a big
yeah, exactly. It's a bit more
drug, which is given,
contentious.
right, it's a, you
Mm,
know, it's given to suppress your immune system. And to
mm,
be cavalier about that, and I actually was thinking about it, that a patient who happened to be a physician assistant came in to the office a few months ago, and she was taking rapamycin once a week. And because she had read, and somebody told her, who was a biochemist, and she had watched something on Instagram, and I was like, please, please, we don't know enough about this. You can't do that. This is actually hurting you.
wow, saw something on Instagram.
Well, this is
Yeah.
how we do it. You know, it
Mm,
was very interesting because I started doing podcasts for, um, they asked me to do a podcast for a friend. And um, as I was doing the podcasts, I realized that there were really three types of people I was interviewing. And
mm,
I've done more. I've been doing them for a few years now, so I've done a few hundred of them. So it dawned on me, it was like the PhD researcher who's serious, who actually believes in what he's doing, who cares, he, she, I don't care, it, whatever,
mm,
them, they care and they actually do amazing work. So those people, I was very interested in their work. Then there were clinicians like myself who actually care, who have experience, who've been doing it for long enough to be able to share their information that I also thought were very interesting. And then there were the so-called physician influencers who spend more time on Instagram than they were spending it anywhere else. And yet they got front, got main stage and were giving a lot of information out. And I started wondering about some of them because their experience did not match the level of expertise that they seemed to be yielding there. And
Mm,
I started thinking that, the public doesn't know. And not only the public, the physicians don't know, the practitioners don't know. So you have to always, at least it makes you less skeptical,
mm,
which is great because I think the conventional, the classical, the classical medical model was way too skeptical and kept things way too closed. And if
mm,
you think about it, a lot of the discoveries and good things that came out didn't come out of the medical schools because they were
mm-mm.
too narrow, right? So that was fine, but you had to kind of start balancing and learning how to balance things. And I think you have to take some things with a grain of salt.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you think of the social media model and what gets rewarded, and then it's got to be a bit more fear-based because otherwise it's not going to get the attention. So it would possibly make you think if I didn't take this rapamycin once a week, well, I'm probably going to get cancer. Or,
I'm not going
it's
to live to be 120.
yeah. And fear and vulnerability can sell a lot of things. And I think it's really important that we keep ourselves in check to really understand that so that we have that healthy balance. And if the screen time on your phone says anything more than an hour a day on Instagram, then your reality is therefore already skewed because you're taking
Right.
too much from a curated space.
Right. And then the other thing that you have to think about is that you're being fed the stuff that you look at.
Mm,
So you're not going to be fed a broad spectrum of information. You're
hmm.
only going to be fed information that fits in the profile of what you were looking at to begin with.
Yeah.
So you're never going to get a broad spectrum. It's like politics, the same thing. You only get
Mm,
one perspective. And, I was talking to somebody the other day about, second opinions. So like, okay, I go, I need a knee replacement. My knee is a mess, right? So
mm,
I go to an orthopedic surgeon that specializes in knee replacements, and he'll say, oh, yeah, you definitely need it. Then the second opinion is also an orthopedic surgeon. Well, what do you think he's going to say? He's trained in the same way. He does the same thing. So clearly, you don't have to waste your time because now you're looking at personalities. You're not looking at anything else. So I
mm,
started saying, and I said that in Don't Let Your Doctor Kill You, the original version of it. I said, maybe we want a different perspective. You want to go to someone who actually will approach your knee differently. They don't believe in knee replacement because they're not orthopedic surgeons, but there may be functional medicine. Maybe they'll believe in stem cells. Maybe they'll believe, in PRP. There are all kinds, peptides. So there are a lot of other ways to look at it. But if you're going to get a second opinion from the same type of person, don't bother. But if you're going to
mm,
get a second perspective, then it might open your mind to that,
mm.
to the fact that you don't want one opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And speaking of that book, Don't Let Your Doctor Kill You, such a good book. Um,
I'm
I'm
right
curious because I was researching you, Erika, and I
too.
read that you actually had the idea for that book about almost 20 years before you actually wrote it. And
Yeah,
instead of releasing it in like the late 90s, you ended up
I
going
did.
with Natural Energy, which I believe was
Right.
your first book, right? So did you feel that it was just too soon, too controversial, too out
I
there at the
did.
time? Or,
You know what? Oh my God. Thank you so much for reading that. So actually I'm working on re-releasing the book because it's going to be 10 years in 2025. So in March, April maybe we're re-releasing it. So I was actually just going to take that piece out of it. Um,
mm,
because now I was talking about a book that was released in 2015. So the interesting thing is, I didn't think it was too early. I thought it was right, but my agent at the time thought that it was a career killer in my new
Hmm.
career as a writer, as an author, right?
Yeah.
And because I didn't have enough experience, I wasn't known, all this other stuff. And then I write this book called Natural Energy, which is about the way mitochondria work at the cellular level, and about L-carnitine and CoQ10, which turns out to be 20 years later, like the biggest thing there is.
Yeah, right. You were a
Everybody thinks,
pioneer. We just didn't
right?
know
And
you
everybody
yet.
thinks I'm an idiot. Like
Mm,
everybody's like, what is she talking about? The
mm.
only people who cared was I was on the Today Show, and um, I got a call from this Japanese company that was making CoQ10 and was trying to import them into the United States, but nobody knew what to do with it. So they
Hmm.
asked me to do some consulting for them, and I wrote a couple of articles for them. That was it. But it was so funny that it turns out I was too early even with that. But I
Mm.
was with
Too
my
early
money.
with everything.
I've been
Yeah.
early with everything. I'm just hoping that the new Don't Let Your Doctor Kill You won't be too early anymore. And I don't think it will be. Just listening to you, I know it
Mm.
won't be too early.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, the world is definitely ready to hear that message again. I
Uh,
think it's
yeah.
very smart to bring it out again because
Yeah.
there's an awareness
Thank
now that I mean, I even
you.
think of some of the wonderful integrative doctors that I've seen where if I look back and think about the advice I was given that I acted on, same chance again to have that consultation, I would not have done what I was told was the right thing to do. And
Yep.
so it's no one's fault. That's the thing. I think we often then think everyone's out to get us and
Mm.
we have to be suspicious of everything we have to build a theory around. No, I disagree with that as well. And I think the art of your book is actually to really do a lot more thinking as a whole being yourself, and make sure you have even footing with your doctor and your team. That is a huge message of yours. How would you recommend if someone's now reflecting and going, oh, I definitely don't feel like I'm on a team with my doctor and I feel like I get bossed around and I don't have time to think about things? What do you recommend to people to develop healthier relationships and really find the right fit? What does it look like?
Like any relationship,
Mm,
if a relationship is a two-way street, it works. If it's a one-way street, it's a dead end. So you
mm,
don't want to be in a dead end, right?
mm,
So you want to be in a relationship where you're not being intimidated. Nobody's scaring you. Nobody's pushing the buttons that will trigger you to get scared, to become a victim. So
mm,
like any relationship, and we're talking about, like romantic relationships, right? But in any relationship, right? Friends, you have to learn to focus on finding the positive. If there is no positive, you don't feel great when you leave the doctor's office, it's the wrong doctor for you.
mm,
It's the wrong doctor. And you know what? Like anything else, you'll find somebody else. And it's all about developing your inner strength and your inner ability to pause before you react, to
mhm,
pause and say, is this kind of an ego injury by this doctor telling me I don't know what I'm talking about, or is ignoring or discarding what I'm saying? Or is this really something I don't really want to be part of? And if I don't
mm,
want to be part of, I'm not going to take advice from someone that I don't feel comfortable with. So I think the first step is to develop our own self confidence, to develop exactly what everybody's talking about, whether it is, the morning affirmations, the meditations, whatever you're doing to build look in the mirror and tell yourself you love yourself every
mm,
morning. Whatever you're doing that is working on your self confidence is what you need to use when you go into the doctor's office. If you don't feel confident, if you don't feel that you could say, you know what, let me think about this.
mm,
Let me not react. Because what happens is, it becomes like you become like a hamster on a wheel, right? Because the
Yeah.
doctor will say, oh, you need a biopsy. And then you go like, oh my God, I need a biopsy. Well, maybe I don't need a biopsy. Maybe I need to step back. It's about non-reacting, taking the pause. But you're not going to be able to take the pause because we've been indoctrinated that anything negative needs to be removed immediately, that everything has to be done immediately. And I can tell you from not just 40 years of experience, from having run a major trauma center as my first job, that unless it's life or death, you don't have to react. There's nothing that you have to react. So there's nothing that needs to be done immediately. However, in the conventional way of thinking, we've been trained to think that everything has to be done instantly. Because if we think, we probably won't do it. And if you
Mm.
think, you probably won't do it. And then you know what happens.
Okay. And so, like, but what if you find like a malignant cancer and you do need an operation? Like, are you saying we actually still have time to think in even those situations? I just want to clarify. Right.
Yes, you always have time to think. Because let's say, God forbid, they find there is there's a lot of biopsies being done that are unnecessary, and
Mm-hmm.
then you have to think about the pluses and minuses of anything, right? Like we'd go for mammograms, and the mammograms just squash our breasts, expose them to radiation, and there's so much scientific support, studies showing that they increase the risk. Just doing a mammogram increases the risk of cancer. So,
Mm.
but
And
we go,
some countries, is it Holland that has stopped making them part of routine
yes,
care? I was
yes,
reading. Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And you know what? But we've read in the United States, we've read about this for the past 20 years.
Wow.
There have been scientific, if you go and you Google Scholar, you go to Google Scholar where you get all the scientific literature, you'll
Mm-hmm.
find that there have been study after study after study after study saying mammograms are not benign. So, like, I would try my best to have someone get an MRI rather than a mammogram if they need to
Mm.
have it. But anyway, the thing is that the biopsies change the anatomy of the breast, so they increase the risk of breast cancer too. So there's a
Mm.
lot, and when you say so, going back to what we were talking about, you go to the doctor, and the doctor, you have the mammogram, it shows something, whatever, questionable, and you have a biopsy and the biopsy comes back positive. Now, you've already increased twice the risk by having the mammogram and doing the biopsy. But now the doctor will say, okay, now we have to take it out. And then we'll do chemo and then we'll do radiation. The thing is that you have time to breathe, and you have to breathe because we stop breathing. The moment somebody scares us
Mm.
so badly, we all stop breathing. You need to breathe. You need to take the moment to think, what is my next step? Is my next step the biopsy, the removal of the cancer? Is it the removal of the breast? Or is it chemotherapy? I can tell you examples in my career where I had, this comes to mind immediately, a 24-year-old who was on birth control pills, which increased the risk of breast cancer.
Mm.
And she got a breast cancer. And we found out, obviously, because she did have a mammogram, and we did do a biopsy because it felt weird. And, I believe in examination. Breast exams
Mm.
are crucial. We, each one of us, should examine our breasts. We should know exactly what our breasts feel like, not
Mm.
wait someone else who doesn't live in our bodies to examine. But anyway, what happened is this 24-year-old gets breast cancer, and they want to take it out. And I sit down and talk to her and her mother. They were both my patients. And this was 25 years ago, at least. And I say, listen, I think it's from the birth control pills. So obviously, everybody's like, oh, birth control pills don't cause cancer. Yeah, they do. Anyway, they increase the risk. So what I would say is, why don't we get her off the birth control pills? And then let's see if chemo can shrink it before you start messing her breast. She's 24, by the way,
Mm.
24. So for some obscure reason, they trusted me, and I was like putting my heart and soul and my brain into the whole thing, hoping to do the right thing by her. So she stopped the birth control pills, and then insurance wouldn't cover. Insurance wanted
Mm.
to take out the mass, and I had to speak to 20 people at the time I was taking insurance, and I had to beg them to let me give her chemotherapy first. P.S. Long story short, we give her chemotherapy, the thing disappears.
Mm.
Disappears. Within 3 months, there was nothing. She never had a recurrence. Obviously, she never went on birth control pills again. She never had a recurrence. She wound up with 3 healthy children. She's still a patient in the practice 25 years later or so. So you have to be able to have the strength, the self confidence, and the ability to think. Now, those are really big, big orders, tall orders. And
Mm.
the world we live in is based on intimidation and fear mongering, as you know. So,
Yeah, I was going to say, as a
right?
clinician, and with the way insurance is set up, and that really kind of paints the picture of how physicians are now in a spot where they don't get to think as
No,
much as
no,
doing great medicine would probably require someone to do.
right. So you
Mm.
have to find the right doctor. You have to be in the right, first of all, you have to be in the right state of mind. Then you
Mm.
have to find the right doctor who, as I said to you, the answer was cares. That
Yeah.
was key, is who cares, and then work together. I have a patient, about 15 years ago, um, ductal cancer and carcinoma in situ, DCIS, was not considered a cancer in the United States. It did not go under the category of breast cancers. It just didn't
Right.
exist because it never spreads and it never does anything. 10 years later, in this big attempt of the, pharmaceutical, you know, the whole
The machine. Yeah.
machine that we live with, it became a cancer, which is why one of the reasons why we have such an increase in cancers, because we talk about that and we say
Ah.
PIS is a cancer, but it's not. So 10
And can
years,
you just repeat it, Erika? I
yeah,
didn't quite catch the what the acronym stands for.
okay, it's ductal carcinoma in situ. So it's
Mm-hmm.
DCIS, which never didn't go on the category of cancer. So
Mm-hmm.
now it's on the category of cancer. So I have a patient who's still with me, and the beauty of what I do, which makes me get up in the morning and go to work as happily as I do, and that I'm so grateful for, is that I have patients who've been with me for 30 years. And so that kind of tells you how much I care about them and how much they care about me. And so this woman came in and she's been a patient now for 15, 20 years. And she got diagnosed with DCIS, this crazy non-cancer cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And we wound up, she listened to me for some obscure reason again. And we wound up finding the pathologist at Columbia who actually said, you know what, you're right. She doesn't need anything. And nothing was ever done about it. She had a biopsy. Because if you have a biopsy, then you can tell what it is.
Mm.
If you don't have a biopsy, you can just guess. And I'm sure there are a lot of times that people don't have biopsies and will never have the diagnosis, but will live happily ever after or not. Who knows? Because there's so many variables, right? So anyway,
Mm.
she's fine. I mean, she just recently got married, actually, and she's fine. She never did anything about it. That was the end of that story.
Right. So you're saying how much of a percentage of breast cancer diagnoses is this particular type of carcinoma?
It's not very high. I can't give you
Mm-hmm.
numbers because I
Yeah.
don't know numbers.
But it would have kicked up a breast cancer diagnosis
Yes,
statistic a couple of
exactly.
percentage points, would you
Correct.
say?
Exactly.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Which is one reason, as I was saying, that why we have such an increased incidence in breast cancer. Well, one of them is that we've introduced new pathological reports and diagnoses that previously were not part of a cancer diagnosis.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. And then, of course, we have introduced things like birth control pill
We introduced that a long time ago. That
in
was,
the
you know,
60s.
oh my God.
Um, and that
No,
was
before they started birth control pills in the late 30s, 1930.
what?
Listen to this. They were tested in the concentration camps in
Oh,
Germany.
yes, of course. Yes,
That's when
I
they
do know
started,
that story.
right? Right. And
Mm,
the guy actually got a Nobel Prize for it and couldn't go because it was during the war to get his Nobel Prize. But his name was Adolf Butenandt. And he was one of the people who started birth control pills. So they tried them and they were giving them in concentration camps. Then they got approved in the United States in the 40s. So by the 50s and 60s, they were all pervasive. And then eventually, even though the FDA approval, and I don't know if you know that, FDA approves drugs for 6 weeks. They
mm.
don't approve them forever. For some reason, patients are on the same drug forever, even though there's no FDA approval for it, because the FDA
Hold
approval.
on, hold on, hold on, hold on.
Uh-huh.
Okay. The FDA approves a drug and
For
the
6
usage approval is
mm,
never a larger window than 6 weeks.
never.
Like never
No.
ever for any drug?
No, and no, I'm sure there are exceptions. So I would say overall, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it also tells you something else, that it leaves the reporting on the safety and the efficacy to the manufacturer. So the
To a
farm,
6 week window. Yeah, as well. So that's all they also have to report on from a safety
right,
perspective.
exactly. And the
And yet
pharmaceutical
people are
company,
on things like statins,
forever, ever,
tamoxifen, like all the things for like,
everything. Yep.
wow.
Yes. Yeah. Forever. And
Mm,
then it's up to the drug company to report that there were problems with the drug, or that
mm-hmm,
any kind, like, what's the efficacy of the Prozac you've been taking for 30 years? I'd like,
mm,
what do you think it might be? Personally, I can't imagine that it would work. I mean, your body eventually says, thanks, I'm just going to let this go through me. It may be toxic to my liver or my kidneys or something else, but it's certainly not going to help my depression.
mm-hmm. Well, yes.
For sure.
Okay. Wow. That's huge. And so then when we think of women's health, this is really interesting because the birth control pills safety data exists around a 6 week window.
And the birth control pills were supposed to be, they were approved specifically to stop ovulation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They were not there to regulate periods. And every
No,
50,
for all the
no,
things we use them for.
right?
Yeah.
I don't
Mm.
know in Australia, but I know that in the United States, every 13-year-old who has irregular periods, which is normal,
Or
uh,
acne. Yeah.
or acne,
Mm.
right, gets them handed out like water. And this
Mm.
is like, wait, this is not what the approval is for to begin with. And then what happens? Why do we have such an increase in the infertility? What's
Mm.
going on? There's so much. Do you know what I do more than anything else when I first see a new patient? I
Mm.
wind up taking them off medications, taking out IUDs with hormones in them because they're synthetic, because I mean, they're non-human identical. I take them off medications before I wind up bringing in anything, because
Mm.
there's so much that is created by the system
Mm.
in our symptoms. So the
Yeah.
first thing I really do is I take people off of stuff.
Mm-hmm. And would you say, though, that medications can sometimes be a fantastic SOS if someone's in a really bad way? I
Sure.
know even in perimenopause, while people are trying to figure stuff out, I've had actually a very close friend just do the birth control pill for 2 months just so she could think and make a plan and then remove them and then found a doctor who could actually help her. But in that small moment, it was literally a I'll get to keep my job this way because otherwise I'm a psycho right now. So like I think we can often people often then tell themselves a story. I always picture our listeners thinking, oh, I'm ashamed, I'm on a medication, I'm a bad person, I'm a failure, it's me, I should be off these, but I can't figure out how. Like, I definitely don't want to leave anyone in the dark.
No,
Yeah.
no,
And I know
no,
you don't either. You're such a caring
no,
person. So I just
please.
wanted to kind of just bring
Yeah, no,
everybody out there on the journey. And
yeah,
it really is about finding those doctors who care to help you with your long game so
right.
that we could get off some of these medications,
Of
especially the synthetic
course.
hormones.
Of course. I think that, listen, I put people on birth control pills like if they go on vacations where they just don't want to have a period or they want to have
Mm,
sex a lot. And, you know, why not? I mean, I don't have a problem with short periods of time. And I think it's all about doing what's right for the patient, helping someone. Like what you just said was so important. And I'm so glad you said it because people don't realize how conventional medicine works really well if you use it the right way.
mm,
Same way is like that's why I was saying about the 6 week,
yeah.
approval that you don't have to stay on anything forever. You don't have to stay on anything forever. You can go like people ask, when I put people on bioidentical hormones, how, can I go off of them? Am I ever going to be able to go off of them? Now, the big thing is with the GLP-1s, will I ever go off of them? You can go off of anything you want. Nothing will happen immediately. I think sometimes I say to people, listen, go off of it because they're not sure it's working. I'm not sure it's working because they're not sure. So I'm going to listen to my
Mm,
patient for sure. So I'll say, let's go off and see what happens. And sometimes they'll say, well, there's no change. I feel the same with or without. Well, then that becomes a little difficult, but we still can deal with it by discussing and figuring out together how we should proceed. And I
mm,
and then I have patients who come in who I haven't seen in years who'll come back and say, I felt better. And now I look at it retrospectively because unfortunately, not all of us live inside our bodies. We have
mm,
taught to live inside our bodies. And it sometimes takes longer to make the right connections. And then we're also tempted to listen to someone else's opinion that we think that whatever they're saying may be, right? The answer. But it might not be. I mean, people come and make connections all the time. And sometimes I go, is it the right connection? Is it the wrong connection? I have no idea. But we can figure it out because, like, if you care, you work
mm.
together to figure it out.
Yeah, I love that you said helping people live in their own bodies.
Yeah,
Often I think women, especially who've been taught to externalize to such a crazy degree,
of
and
course.
ignore our symptoms and be gaslit and nothing's wrong,
Yes.
you're fine, and all those
No, you're
things.
crazy. You're crazy.
Yeah.
It's in your head.
um and then so you don't trust yourself. And I often think some of these awful things that so many women in their 30s and 40s and 50s especially go through after this decades of mental load, caring for everyone and all the things.
Exactly.
Someone gets hit by autoimmune. I got hit by chronic inflammatory response syndrome, with mold, and like, I mean, we could list
Yeah.
them all. I sometimes really not I sometimes think, I know now, having spoken to so many amazing doctors, having lived my own experience, a huge part of that is almost the body like just freaking shoving it in your face in such a massive way to make you stop
Yeah.
and go,
Absolutely.
this is a big problem and you can't just sweep it under the carpet and keep going.
No. I
Mm,
think I think the sooner we learn that we have to take care of ourselves.
mm,
We're so, because I'm giving a talk at A4M this week actually on postpartum. I've been doing a lot of work in the postpartum area. And it's like there's no one taking care of women after they have babies. They have no preparation for it. After they have
Mm.
a baby, 6 weeks later, you go, I don't know, in Australia, but like you go to the to the obstetrician, they say, oh, baby's fine, you're fine. Goodbye, go have sex. Okay. What about that?
Ah.
My life has completely changed. I am
Mm.
not the same person I was. And how are you helping me by sending me back to the world that is no longer the world I know? So
Mm.
so we started working really hard, and we actually had our first symposium in San Antonio. I want to say October, because who knows what month it is anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
But on women's health. And this is like one of the things that specific women's health, because postpartum is such a specifically important, not just hormonally, but of course hormonally, because everything changes, but it's culturally, emotionally, physically, societally, every which way, everything changes. And we need to stop and give the women the support they need to belong, because none of us
And to
feel
adapt to the new
right.
reality and the new way of
Exactly.
living. Yeah.
Right. Right. Because
I have my acupuncturist, his wife is Korean,
uh-huh.
and they actually flew home to Korea for the
Makes
birth
sense. Sure.
and the care afterwards, because you get to be cared for in the Korean medical system if you've given birth. The
Isn't
women
that
get brought everything, including the baby when it's time to feed. They just lie back and start to read and develop the resources they need for this next chapter. And they sleep when they can. And the baby gets whisked away as soon as they've been fed, and they get fed a lot of gelatinous stews. And it
I
was
love it.
just so exciting to know that
Beautiful.
somewhere in the world we still have
Yeah.
that wisdom.
Yeah. And you know
Mm,
what? And we have to learn from that. We have to.
mm,
I mean, if you think about 20, 25 years ago in the United States, we separated people as they got old, nursing homes, goodbye, get rid of them.
mm,
Instead of keeping them in the home and realizing the multi-generational households fared better from the pregnancy, postpartum, raising a kid, and kept these people alive longer. So
mm-hmm.
why would you take an older person and get rid of them, put them out of the out of society, out of the situation, and not get their wisdom to expand and make things better?
Yeah. Absolutely. I had the great misfortune of living 25,000 kilometers away from my grandparents.
No,
But I
wait.
see,
Where do they live? Where do you
oh,
live?
France and England.
How
Um,
beautiful.
yeah, which it was amazing for holidays. And
Right.
I guess I guess it was
Right.
amazing from the sense that when we did spend time together, we were living together for like 1 month, let's say.
Right.
So
That's
that
so nice.
was very special, and I was extremely close, especially to my grand-mère.
Oh,
But
nice.
I
Oh, you speak
see
French. I
I
love
do
it.
speak French, but
Mhm.
I see my son, who has his two grandmas and one grandpa, my mum and dad and my mother-in-law, who are all friends as well. So that's
Oh, how
beautiful.
beautiful. I
I mean,
love it.
very lucky.
Mhm.
But they see each other. He pops down on the train for like school holidays. He loves his grandparents so much, and they have such a beautiful relationship. And it keeps them young and hip
Yes.
and learning
Yes.
all this stuff about his life and generation. And
It's
um,
so important.
it's so beautiful. And I can see how powerful that is to their longevity metrics. Like,
Of
they're
course.
sharp as tacks, and they're doing all sorts of things. And I'm
Uh,
taking him out to dinner still, late 70s. One's about to be 80. And I just
Wonderful.
think that's fantastic. And
Yes.
it's, I mean, I think Alzheimer's and dementia have obviously changed the landscape of, well, I actually can't deal with this if it's not even my mum or my dad. That's really
Yeah,
tough.
of course.
But the principle of multi-generational living speaks to what we know in nature to be true, which is biodiversity creates healthy environments. It's the same with
Correct.
us.
Correct. We're not taking away the idea of that there are diseases.
Mm,
But what I'm trying to take away is the idea that everybody has to be bunched up in that, and that we don't spend more time at working at avoiding diseases, at
Mm.
increasing the support at all levels to keep people healthy, because that actually makes for a much better life.
Yeah. And could probably replace a few medications, I dare
Just a few,
say.
just a few. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Okay. And so uh, we've talked postpartum. I want to come into midlife because you have mentioned bioidentical hormones a couple of times and you're a fan. So obviously they are a medication of sorts as well, whether it's a patch, whether it's a, what makes the bioidentical hormone a really healthy option beyond this 6 weeks tested for safety kind of window that we're talking about conventionally?
Yeah, well, I think there are a lot of so-called medications that are healthy because your body makes them.
Mm,
And those hormones, bioidentical hormones, are part of them. Before they were called bioidentical, they were called natural hormones because estradiol, progesterone, testosterone are made by your body before menopause. And the hormones that we're using, as I call supplementation rather than replacement, is
mm,
to support, because as you start dropping, those hormones start dropping, you push them up. So the thing is that if you can get them up to where you don't have symptoms, where you're protecting your brain, get rid of Alzheimer's as much as possible, keep your bones strong, your cardiovascular system, then you're actually using the hormones not just to eliminate the symptoms of like hot flashes, night sweats, insomnia, etc.,
mm,
symptoms of perimenopause and menopause, but what you're doing is you're actually helping people maintain health.
mm.
They stay well. So the bioidenticals are molecularly, and that sounds like it gets really like complicated.
Technical. Yeah.
I don't want to go there. Um, because I don't want anybody to be scared. I want people to be empowered and not scared. So they are their molecules look exactly like the hormones when we make them.
Mm.
Now they're synthetic. They're not made. They're not from yams. I mean, don't
Yeah.
go buy 10 pounds of yams. Eat them. It's not going to happen. It's not going to do
Uh,
anything. But because they used to promote them as such, because everybody's marketing. So that's what we're doing.
mm,
So anyway, these are made in a lab to look exactly like what your body makes. And then your body accepts them. It's like fitting a round peg into a round hole, as opposed
mm.
to a square peg in a round hole, which is what we were doing with the non-human identicals. And then this is where it gets complicated
It's
because,
okay.
okay, because
We
there
got a bunch of nerds out there who love the
love it.
complicated stuff.
But this is the most important piece of that. There's no such thing as class effect. And what went on for decades and destroyed the whole hormone really industry
Mm,
for women was the fact that the study that destroyed everything in 2002, and it was true, the principal investigators came out and said it was wrong and it was all, the study had no legs to stand on. But anyway, it was about class effect, which means all estrogens behave the same. So if it is Premarin or conjugated equine estrogen or ethinyl estradiol, which is like what you put in birth control pills, or progestins like medroxyprogesterone acetate, or whatever these, they have weird names,
mm,
they're not identical. So all of these were bunched together, and we were told that there is class effect. All estrogens are the same. All progestogens are the same. Well, that's not true, because
mm,
you don't need science to tell you, to prove, if you think about it, that if something doesn't look the same, it's not going to behave the same.
mm,
Why would anybody buy into it is beyond me. So I didn't buy into it, which is how I got to being the hormone person, because I was like, wait a minute. When the study went awry, it wasn't about bioidentical hormones. It was about hormones that didn't look anything like it. And those had been around since the 50s. And as it turns out, they were better than nothing because they took off like 7 million women off hormones. And guess what? Their brains went, their bones went, their everything.
Mm,
And you just kind of sacrificed 7 million women in the United States, which to me is criminal. It's not even anything else. So the whole point became we have to educate about class effect. So in
mm.
2011, I was at a conference in Rome. And it
Tough
was,
gig. Yeah.
yeah, that's why it was
I
kind
love
of
how you name dropped
somebody,
Rome there, Erica.
somebody
I
has to
picked
go
up
to
on that. Yeah.
uh-huh. Somebody has to go to Rome once in a while. I grew
Someone
up,
has to do it.
somebody
Hmm.
had to. So I went to the conference. And it was the International Menopause Society, which was a lot more evolved, let's say, than the North American Menopause Society or the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology. They were more open-minded, and there were a lot of presentations saying there is no class effect
Hmm.
because here is the data, and there was a lot of data to support it, and there were a lot of studies, and there still are, and more studies that came in, but there was enough in those days saying that different estrogens behave differently. So you can't take it and move it, from one estrogen to the next. How this didn't cross the Atlantic? I crossed the Atlantic. I went back. I was telling everybody about it. I was at, panel discussions with conventional doctors from, big universities. They never heard about it. So this
Wow.
is where the whole thing went, awry. That they thought that there was no class effect, and I kept on maintaining there is class effect, and here's the proof
Mm,
that there is no class effect. So everybody behaves differently. So that's how we got to it eventually, and now
hmm.
it's getting there. But you know what? It still hasn't gotten there because medical school doesn't train you correctly. Because
I
medical,
was going to say, like, there's this sort of cult mindset of there is this one way you have to think.
yeah,
And like, ironically, you don't get to question, which is the scientific
oh, wait a minute.
method. Let's question, let's keep
Yes,
evolving and progressing. And
yeah,
and so that to me is why you can see these amazing doctors like yourself and the gorgeous menopause chicks, like everybody's out there trying to help women realize, hey, you just got
right,
to find the doctors who care to keep up with the
right.
science, because if you are being gaslit right now, this is old defunct messaging, and
It
yet
is.
people then still go to their primary care physician and they still
You
get met with, yeah, no, we can't give that to you because
know
you
it'll
have a
cause
family
cancer.
risk. Yeah.
Right, it'll cause cancer. And no, not only does it cause cancer, we know that it prevents it. It protects you. It
Mm,
keeps you at a very different level of functioning. And if your body has hormones in it, as in bioidentical hormones, estradiol, progesterone, testosterone, thyroid, etc., then you can get off the couch and exercise. Then
mm,
you can stop eating all those sugars. Then you don't have to drink alcohol. Then you can actually take care of yourself and sleep at night.
mm,
And you can stay healthy. You don't have to get sick just
mm.
because you got.
Yeah.
I know.
Okay. And so and
Wow.
so in terms of then the bioidentical conversation, some women will choose to not bring that in. They will choose to see this as a spiritual rite of passage into a new phase, and that is absolutely their right to do that. But for the women who want to, but are finding it really hard to have nuanced conversations, because like I don't know about other people, but I have been talking to my friends. I'm 49, so this is a big part of our chat right now. And some people have been given like the bog standard micronized progesterone with the estrogel, and then they can't take it because they have horrific anxiety, like it's too much, and some, and their hearts start beating even crazier than they were just in
Mm.
regular perimenopause. And so how do we stay empowered when we don't know what all the options are out there? What's the best way to find doctors who are prepared to then say, okay, well, let's try patch. Okay, let's try this form. Let's try, because there still aren't that many out there. That's a huge part of the challenge, right?
Yeah, and you know what? And there are a lot that are hanging up shingles saying they know what they're doing, and they have these websites that they say we do hormones, but they really don't know what they're doing. That's
Mm,
that's a big problem. And that was like when I was saying about watching these people that I was doing podcasts with and saying, you have no experience, you don't know what you're talking about, and yet here you have 1 million followers, right?
mm,
So I think it becomes really difficult. It's really, really difficult. I think the way I look at it, and that's what I say to patients. I mean, if I could see the whole world, I would be more than happy to do that. But
yeah.
unfortunately, I can't. I do have patients in Australia, by the way,
Oh,
but
wow.
yeah, because we've been doing telemedicine for like 20
Mm,
years before there was any COVID. So now we got all kinds of releases to do it, but we were doing it for.
mm,
So anyway, the thing is that what I say is work with me for 3 months. If
mm-hmm,
in 3 months you don't feel like your old self from your 30s and you don't feel great, I'm not the right person.
mm,
And if you think that way about anybody you see, then it makes you more empowered. You feel like, okay, maybe she's right, maybe she's wrong. Like any relationship, what I said before, right?
yeah, yeah.
Or maybe it won't work, but I have 3 months. At the end of these 3 months, we can evaluate and see you got this right, you got this wrong. Do we want to continue or do we want to try somebody else? And I
Mm,
think that teaching doctors that healthcare is the ultimate service industry, and you
mm,
want the doctor to know that they're there not to bully you, but to respect and be helpful to you and to take care of you, then you're going to do okay. Because
mm.
I will tell you that I started doing estradiol and progesterone many years ago. Can't remember how many these days, right? I don't know, in the 90s. And within 4 or 5 years, it dawned on me that the patients were doing great compared to where it started, but there was room for improvement. And that's
Yeah.
when I started working with thyroid and adrenal.
I was
And
going to say, because it feels like we're not really talking about thyroid and adrenals in this
right,
conversation. It's all HRT, HRT.
no,
Mm,
we're not going to leave it at that. No,
no.
we will. So then I started working with thyroid and adrenal, and people started feeling better.
Mm,
And then I realized, well, why would I not think of adrenal and thyroid? Because they're part of it. Because it's all about the HPA axis, the hypothalamic
mm,
pituitary adrenal axis, right? And you need your hormones to be released everywhere, right? And then we started talking about diet. We started cutting back on sugar, and that helped. And then we started increasing protein, and that helped. And then we started giving people some creatine, and that helped with the muscle and the brain. And there is so much information out there that you have to kind of tweak as many pieces as possible. Of course,
mm.
it's a never ending story. You can wind up taking 1,000 supplements or just say, listen, then we started talking about peptides. That was before there was GLP-1 agonists. And we were working with them, and we were working with oral peptides, and they were helping. So there's a lot of stuff now. The NAD that everybody's talking about, we were working with precursors of NAD, and that would give energy. Then the other thing was sleep. Sleep is a disaster. Women in perimenopause and menopause don't sleep. It's Mother Nature's way of taking us out. And
Well, it certainly feels like they're trying to take you out.
but we're not going down. We
Mm-mm.
will not
We're
let them
not
have.
going down. Yep.
No, we're not. No, because we have wisdom to share. That's the
Mm,
key. And we want to support each other and help each other.
mm,
So then you said, oh, okay, so we have to get people to sleep. Well, everybody's taking sleeping pills. So, and they're sleepwalking and getting into trouble. So there had to be something better. Well, there are some medications that you can take, like diazepam and all these um, things that will help you sleep. But eventually, there's data that says that it may increase the risk of Alzheimer's, although I'm not so sure it's true. But I would look at that because I'm a conventional
Mm,
doctor and I know how to write scripts. So, and do that.
mm,
The other thing is, then they start coming out with a lot of other things like calcium, magnesium, zinc, um, belladonna, all kinds of herbals and all kinds of combinations of things. And they didn't have to just be naturopathic. They could, homeopathic, they could just be naturopathic working together. So there's a lot of stuff you could do. And the more
mm,
you do, the better the outcome. And then
mm-hmm,
the thing is, what I said from the beginning that I hope everybody hears is you can take a break. You
mm,
don't have to do it all the time. You can just take a break and let your body recalibrate itself.
mm-hmm. I
And that's
love that because I think we forget, and then you get so scared that you're not going to be able to sleep
right.
again that it becomes
Yeah.
a crutch.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, you just never want to feel like that person 5 months ago who was shouting
Right.
at everybody because you were getting like 3 hours of sleep and it was broken at best.
Of course. And I
Mm,
think being scared and worrying about how much time you're going to sleep makes it impossible for you to sleep.
yeah, yeah.
I remember being on a book tour um, and having to go to 24 cities in 23 days or some kind of insanity like that.
Mm,
And that I was, I had to be on TV. It was a PBS thing. And I was literally obsessed with having to get 7 hours of sleep at night. And I was in my 40s. So I was like, really, I had to get it, right? And the more I worried about it, the less likely I was to sleep.
mm,
I totally bombed it because I couldn't sleep. I was so
mm,
scared that I wouldn't sleep. And I hear that people tell me about it all the time, and it's true. You get so afraid of not sleeping that you don't sleep.
mm.
So that's where like meditation and breathing and these beautiful apps that exist. Well, we use Insight Timer and Calm and Aura and all these apps where you just either listen to music or you listen to meditation or you listen to all kinds of right um, support that you get and you do well. Or you could just listen
Mm,
to a book that's boring. You could do fine with that. Go to
yeah.
yeah.
100%. And I know, a lot of people say things like Aura Ring, like you then become too obsessed with your metrics. I think there's a healthy balance. And I actually really like going, oh,
I
I
saw
didn't
you.
think I was that stressed today, but I can see it's like right up at the top of the curb. I'm going to do that 3-minute breathing exercise they're suggesting I do because that's actually a really good
Yes.
idea for my
Yeah,
HPA axis cells.
exactly. And the Aura Ring, I want to tell you that the Aura Ring, I'm one of those who I had the Aura Ring, I wore it for a few months, then I was like, forget it. I can't
Mm.
because it stresses me.
Ah, you became too
I was
attached
like,
to the
I
metrics.
was like, oh my
Yes.
God, how many minutes of REM? How many deep sleep? How
Yeah,
many
yeah.
core sleep? I'm like, forget it. I get it. And then the other thing is, the continuous glucose monitoring. There are a lot
Mm,
of things we can do which are great, but do it for a couple of weeks if you get stressed by it. It'll give you an idea. You'll know how you're doing. And then, your body probably does the same thing later on. So
mm,
we can just do it. There's so many pieces of information we can accomplish, that we can acquire, that we can accomplish so much to help us.
mm,
We do that, you know, like, people like, the grounding, like getting outside and putting your feet on the ground. Well, when it's winter, like it's here, I don't think
yeah.
I'm going to, but I did it all summer and I loved it. So you just do it when you need to do it. You
Mm,
don't, you have to give yourself a lot of room and say, today I'm going to do it, tomorrow I'm not going to do it, and it's okay.
Yeah, and having that healthy relationship
Right?
with
Right.
information rather than, because then you get stuck in the externalization of everything out there
Yes.
knows my body better than I do.
Right, right.
Mm,
And only you know your body. And the
mm.
more you spend time working on your own body, finding out what's going on in there, the better off you are. And the more likely you are to do well. So you're not
Mm.
going to have to worry about finding the right doctor because you are the right doctor, because you're right.
Ooh, I love that, Erica. What a beautiful place to finish. Thank you for this amazing exploration. I feel like it was just you have the right to check in with yourself as your primary carer and
Yeah,
then develop healthy relationships with others.
I love
Mm,
it. I
mm,
love it. Well,
so
you're
good.
marvelous. You're so.
So are you. Thanks for joining me on the show.
Oh my God. Thank you for allowing me to come down under with you.
I hope you loved today's show as much as I loved bringing it to you. I want to remind you that if you are someone who craves a low tox community that is judgment free, full of empowerment, has health professionals and building health professionals that can support you, as well as me in there answering questions multiple times a week, I want to invite you to join the Low Tox Club. For the price of less than a cup of coffee a month, you have an annual membership for $49 Australian, so it's about $30 US or euro, that allows you to have a member masterclass every single month with a health professional or global expert from the podcast, where we have them to ourselves for an hour to ask questions and deep dive further. You have the beautiful supportive chat group. You have Q&As with me answering questions. We read books and talk about them, and a whole bunch more. You can head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the explore tab, and join the club is the very first option on that list. Of course, we have over 10 evergreen courses that you can jump into anytime, whether it's navigating everyday low tox swaps with our Go Low Tox signature course, whether you have kids and you're wanting to know how to best support them with our Low Tox Kids course, whether you're planning a family and looking at a healthy low tox preconception journey, reducing inflammation, especially the chronic kind, with our Inflammation Ninja course, many other courses. You can again head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the courses tab, and you'll see all of the options, which includes a business course, my Low Tox Method program. A lot of people don't know, but I was doing a lot before starting Low Tox Life in 2009, and I was a business consultant across hospitality, health, retail, and cosmetics. I have been in business consulting for a very long time, so I absolutely adore helping people move into the low tox space or develop their low tox businesses. So that's a way I can support you. And then, of course, there's our wonderful social media communities at Low Tox Life on Instagram, and of course, the website with over 250 gluten-free recipes, blogs, downloadable PDFs to help you navigate wanting to get rid of synthetic fragrances in your school or office. I could go on. So head to lowtoxlife.com, see what takes your interest or fancy, and thank you so much for being a part of our podcast community. I love reading your reviews. I appreciate every follow and subscribe, and I want to just remind you to finish off that if there's anything you heard that you found interesting from a medical or scientific perspective, it is intended as education only. Please always chat to a health professional who knows you and your situation best. I'll see you next week. Bye.